welcome to MASHmouth, a podcast covering every single episode of the hit 1970s sitcom MASH. I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Ethan.
All right, Ethan. So, I have something important to ask you.
Yes. Lay it on me.
So tell me what your most disappointing TV show ending was, in your opinion.
Oh, ending? Okay. So, I would say that the first time that I've ever been disappointed by, just how it ended and how, a cliffhanger resolved or not resolved was the show My Name Is Earl. Are you familiar at all with My Name Is Earl?
No, I don't think so.
It was this NBC sitcom from 2005, and it was one of the first sitcoms to kind of be more, a little more cinematic, a little more modern. It kind of didn't have a laugh track, and it was a cool, interesting show with kind of edgy humor for the time. And it was all about this guy who's trying to do good. He has a list of all the bad things he does, and every episode is him making it up, going through his list and redeeming himself. And the whole idea of the show was that he's gonna get to the end of the list, and then it ends at season 4 on a cliffhanger ending, involving his children, and it was just absolutely insane, and that's just where it ends, and it was the first time that I've ever been but where'd the show? Give me more show, please, come on!
Did it get canceled, or was it just...
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh,
apparently,
that sucks.
the creator of the show, before writing this cliffhanger ending for season 4, went to NBC and, made sure that they would get a season 5. So they wrote this cliffhanger ending, and then it was just alright, you're actually canceled, bye.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and he, did, a Reddit AMA, a few years ago, being how would you end My Name Is Earl now? And he was just going through, oh, this is what I would have done, and I was very disappointed that we couldn't get to do it. And apparently they tried to do, a movie for a long time, and, that sounds insane. Anytime a TV show threatens to do a movie, just don't believe it. As a My Name Is Earl fan, as a Community fan, those movies are never going to get made. Or even Arrested Development ended with alright, we're done, but we might do a movie. They're not doing a movie. Never believe them. What was yours?
Okay, so I actually have a couple, and I don't really think that they're interesting because I feel like a lot of people feel this way, but my most disappointing ending for sure was Game of Thrones. I really didn't like how it ended, and
Of course.
Yeah, I think that it was just not well done in the sense that it felt rushed, that it might have been okay if it wasn't so rushed. But my, of course, other most disappointing ending was The Sopranos, but we're not going to stop believing, I guess. And that did get a movie, but the movie was also disappointing, and to me, in my opinion. And so, yeah, I would say pretty disappointing. I think my most disappointing show that had so much potential was actually this CW show called The Tomorrow People, and it got canceled after one season. It had so much potential, but it was just never going to be good. And
I've never heard of that. What was that about?
It was, oh my god, I don't even remember, but I remember really liking it, but it was a CW show, so it was not gonna be good.
CW shows are good for 24 episodes for one season, and they run out of all their ideas.
Yeah.
I was such a big fan. That's another big disappointment for me, just in general. I was such a big fan of The Flash, the CW Flash, and the first 2 seasons of that show are legitimately, incredible, good adaptation of this character, had such a good storyline and good energy, and then, you could just tell that they kind of ran out of all of their ideas to do for this character to, properly explore him, and just defaulted to, some basic CW trash.
Speaking of the CW trash, I didn't watch it because I stopped watching the show because I became older than 14, but I watched Supernatural for a really long time, and apparently that ending was quite disappointing. I don't know, I can't really comment on it, but yeah, that show just kind of turned into a disappointment, I feel. Again, just my personal thoughts on it, but,
I've never seen Supernatural, but I have watched the 2.5 hour Sarah Z video explaining the advanced shipping dynamics of that show. Oof. And how it just went off the rails.
Yeah. That's how I had to learn about the finale, because I was certainly not watching it.
You were done with it.
Yeah.
So, let's move on from disappointments to, I think, one of the absolute highlights of doing the show so far. This episode we watched, I think, is one of my absolute favorites.
Yeah, you had said before we even started the idea for this podcast, you were like, I love this episode called Tuttle. This is the episode.
This episode rules.
You absolutely loved it, and I was so excited to watch this episode again, because for some reason, like, I just haven't seen this episode that many times. It's just not in my rotation. I didn't remember it all that much, and I really loved this episode, and I understand now why you were so smitten with this episode, because it's so fun.
So, in this episode, Tuttle, Hawkeye and Trapper make a large donation to a local orphanage, but instead of taking credit, Hawkeye invents Captain Tuttle as a stand-in for the generous donor. This comes back to bite Hawkeye when everyone in the unit, including General Clayton, want to meet the non-existent captain. This episode is fantastic, and we should mention that this is one of the highest rated episodes in IMDb, and it definitely shows, because this one is just super fun. It has such a fun concept and escalates in a really compelling way where the entire time it's like this whole house of cards is being built up and could get knocked down at any moment. And it's just a really interesting, fun watch.
Yeah, I think that, I have no data to really back this up besides the high-rated IMDb episode, but I feel like this is a fan favorite episode. Because it's just so ridiculous, right?
Yeah,
it's so funny.
It's a very simple concept, but built up to this extreme degree where until the very end, you're like, okay, is this all gonna collapse around them? But no, it never does. And it works really well.
Yeah, you have this whole sense of okay, how is Hawkeye going to get out of this one? Because this is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So let's get into the actual episode a little bit more. We see in the beginning Hawkeye and Trapper kind of moving this box of, I don't really know what it's supplies. It's they say it's powdered milk and bandages and stuff like that.
And penicillin.
Yeah, and it's revealed that it's for the orphans. They kind of make it seem like they're selling it on the black market at first, but then they go over to Sister Teresa, who's a nun, and they say, okay, this is for the orphans. All good nuns are named
Teresa.
Of course. So I wasn't sure about, what this was. At first I thought they were kind of stealing this stuff, but I think the next scene where Radar is asking Hawkeye to sign for it, it seems like it's more like a legitimate donation. So I was kind of confused about this part.
It's probably one of those things where it's best not to examine it too hard. I think it is kind of an off-the-books thing, or at least as far as things go. But because they're donating to a church orphanage, the plot had to get into motion some way. And introducing the concept as this seemingly shady deal, I'm sure was just done for comedic effect, and putting it on this fictional Captain Tuttle was just more of a fun thing for Hawkeye to do in the moment that he didn't realize would become such a situation around him.
Yeah, I kind of, as the episode went on, I kind of interpreted it as it was a legitimate donation, but it was just really large. So Hawkeye didn't want the recognition for it. Yeah, and he even says that's why he puts it under Captain Tuttle, I feel, because he says Captain Tuttle doesn't want the thanks and the praise and whatnot. And that really kind of aligns with Hawkeye's character so much that he doesn't want to be applauded for something that's not, that's just okay, you're a good person. You should be doing things for orphans, probably.
Yeah, probably. That's probably a good thing to do. But after he tells the nun that, like, oh, this is Captain Tuttle, he even, for a moment, I'm sorry, I have no idea what I'm trying to say.
No,
I've kind of lost the plot already.
It's kind of hard to go into this episode. It's like, what was it, Dear Dad, that we did?
Yeah.
This is like a very vignette style too, where stuff kind of just happens. There's no like huge plot. I mean, Hawkeye kind of gets into this whole issue by making up Captain Tuttle. Then everyone wants to meet Tuttle. Like, Henry wants to see him, Frank wants to meet him and like be quartered with him, which is kind of weird. And then the general comes and wants to see him.
What I love about this, and you're right, this has basically like no conflict other than that people want to see this guy, but otherwise it's a very like loose episode of just an escalating one thing. There isn't really a B plot. There isn't really like much driving it other than this lie kind of spiraling out of control. And what I really liked about just how the Captain Tuttle thing is handled is that everyone wants to see him because he is a supposedly great, lovable, like very handsome guy. Like, they're not even trying to catch Hawkeye out in this lie. They're just like, oh, that guy sounds great. Like, I definitely know him. I've hung out with him because that's how cool I am. I'm cool enough to hang out with Tuttle. That's the whole thing for this episode. That they're like, oh, he's super cool, right?
I thought that was played so well, too, for the laughs of, like, as the episode goes on, the people who don't know that Tuttle is fake kind of start making up these ideas of him in their head. Like, Frank at one point calls him Johnny because his name is Jonathan Tuttle, or supposedly Jonathan Tuttle.
Jonathan S. Tuttle, like David S. Pumpkins.
So one thing, though, that I noted was, this is kind of an aside, but Frank and Margaret were talking in the beginning of this episode, and Frank says to her, they, meaning Hawkeye and Trapper, drew devil horns on my picture of Senator McCarthy.
Yes, I was gonna mention this. This is my favorite thing in the world.
And I was like, of course Frank Burns worships Senator McCarthy. That tracks so hard.
Listen, man, I know very little about 50s history and, like, you know, older politics, but I know one thing. That McCarthy, like, the worst man alive. So I was very like, of course they would draw devil horns on him. He was the worst man to exist.
Yeah, and of course Frank would, you know, just be in love with him.
Yeah, of course, because Frank is that kind of guy.
This would be at the height of McCarthy's, like, heyday, basically. And so for Frank to be, like, worshipping him enough to have a picture of him in his tent, like, that's weird.
Right next to Jesus and Mom.
Yeah, I forgot about that. So Radar has Hawkeye sign off on the supplies as Captain Tuttle, and then Henry has to re-sign off on it, you know, commanding officer stuff. And Henry is like, oh, Tuttle, do I know him? As it, like, he doesn't know who's in his outfit. Like, that, I feel, is peak Henry right there. Like, that, I don't know who that is.
The way that this rumor spread and the way that everyone kind of added to it felt just very, like, elementary school.
Yeah.
Just this one kid who doesn't exist, who's like the coolest kid on the playground, and everybody's friends with him. Maybe that's why I like this one so much, because I love things about, like, kids playing pretend and has that vibe. And this was a big kids playing pretend episode in the army base.
It's so funny that you say that, too, because it's revealed in the episode when Trapper asks him, like, where did you get the name Tuttle from? And Hawkeye says that it was the name of his imaginary friend as a kid. And I thought that was actually, like, so adorable.
His imaginary friend, Scapegoat, who he would blame everything on.
Yeah.
And I like that as an adult, instead of Tuttle being a scapegoat for Hawkeye, it's what he uses to lavish praise onto.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Tuttle's just a good man. He's never done anything wrong.
Yeah.
And it just escalates. Like, again, this one's hard to talk about, but for a while, Frank and Margaret just, like, really want to meet Tuttle and, like, oh, I need to see him. Apparently he's very handsome. Margaret's, like, super into the description that they give for him, which I think is very funny. And I like how they're not even thinking that it's like a Hawkeye scheme. They're just like, oh, I want to see this guy. He seems like fun.
We should mention that the reason that Margaret and Frank want to meet Tuttle so bad, and why Henry wants to meet Tuttle, as he should, because he's the commanding officer, but whatever. But Frank and Margaret want to meet Tuttle because he is apparently new and he hadn't, introduced himself or reported to Frank or anything like that. So that kind of drives into the next part of the episode where Hawkeye, Radar, and Trapper are making up a personnel file for Tuttle. And to me, that was the absolute best scene of the entire episode. I love that scene so much. There were so many funny one-liners in that. I absolutely loved it.
I love the description they give of him. They say that he was born in 1925. You have to do the math of okay, when is that? And he would be 25 years old. Apparently he's a 6'4", I forget the weight, but a good build. Auburn hair, hazel eyes. It's oh, look at this handsome man that doesn't exist.
I hate to cut you off, but you can't do math. He said he was born in 1924. He would not be 25.
In the 50s?
Yeah.
Would he not be?
Think about it.
1924... it's 26.
Maybe I can't do math.
Is there not 26 years difference between 50? Hang on, let me bust out a calculator. 50 minus 20. You're making me do this.
Oh, wait, yeah, I think you are
26.
Right. I was thinking he would be 36. Oh my god.
No.
I'm so bad at this. Sorry.
I'm leaving that in. You're not getting me to cut that out.
Now that I've just outed myself that I can't do math. Anyway, okay, I'm sorry. Let's get back on track.
You're going to be a lawyer, not a mathematician. It's fine.
That's true. So I loved when Hawkeye said, oh, let's throw in a little something for Hot Lips, because they knew that Margaret was going to try to be with this guy, go after this guy regardless. And I thought that was really funny.
She gets around a bit, doesn't she?
She does.
They make several jokes about how she's with General Clayton while being with Frank. And, Frank is super insecure about, their status as a relationship because this Turbo King is just walking around the camp unseen. And it doesn't feel demeaning to her at all either. Not to go into it too much, but, I don't know. I don't think that this is mean to her in really any way. She likes people, and that's all right.
Yeah, I think that they just kind of knew that she has an appetite for sexuality, and that she was gonna want to go after him or see him. I mean, they all want to see him.
Even Frank is oh, he's my at the end of the episode, he's oh, he's my best friend.
Yeah, what the hell?
Never met him before.
I love how they literally made up a medical school too, and they made him German, so they said that he graduated from Adolf Hitler High School. I was like, oh my god, that's so ridiculous.
Hawkeye joked about that, but he's no, it's a bridge too far. But when Frank sees that, he's oh, he's probably a Nazi.
That was too funny. Then when Frank and Margaret believe that he's real, I guess, they see his personnel file and whatnot. Margaret makes a call to General Clayton to kind of get the lowdown on Captain Tuttle, because they still haven't seen him because he's fake. So in this scene, I wanted to note we get to see Sparky, which is really cool, and I think that that's really fun because we usually don't get to see him.
Who's Sparky?
He was the
he was the switchboard operator, right? Yeah. I love switchboard operators, by the way. Literally every time I watch something older or set in the past that has a switchboard operator, I'm oh man, just imagine that being your job. Imagine sitting at a console and your entire job is to plug in these AV cables or just audio cables into a thing. And I know that makes me sound incredibly young to older people who might be listening to this. But I just find switchboards and switchboard operators to be the coolest thing in the world.
That's so funny that you say that, because when I was watching Radar, make the call, essentially, I was man, that's so cool. I can't believe they used to have to make phone calls like that. That's insane. Okay, let's get back on track, because we are really rambling here. This is getting rambly. Yeah, so Margaret makes a call to General Clayton to kind of get the lowdown on Captain Tuttle. And then Radar has Sparky, the phone operator, connect the call back to him. And Hawkeye takes over the call and pretends to be General Clayton, which I thought was so ridiculous because he was literally right outside the room where they were calling from.
Literally right there.
And oh my god, I was like, there was no way that they did not hear that.
He was making all these jokes about how Margaret's, like, been with him and, like, can't wait to be with her again. And it's like, she never even trips up. She's like, oh, of course, this is a natural thing for him to be saying. It's completely fine. And that whole bit was pretty funny.
Yeah, I like that.
I also love that Radar is reading, like, just these old comic books. He does this from time to time. And I love that he gave Sparky a copy of Captain Marvel. Radar tells him, like, hey, I need you to do this favor for me. He just goes, Shazam. And I love that, because that's very, like, period accurate. Captain Marvel, Shazam now, was, like, literally the most popular comic book superhero in the 50s.
That's so funny, because I have a little bit of trivia on that. So that comic book that they were reading actually didn't come out until 1969. So it was like way after the Korean War would have taken place. Yeah, I thought that was so funny. So anyway, so Hawkeye and Trapper and Radar conduct this like covert operation essentially, and they get Tuttle's back pay because, you know, they had just invented him. So apparently the war had been going on for 14 months at that point, which, okay, good timeline. And then
gonna stretch on much longer soon enough.
So then a paymaster, whoever it is, the financier, comes and gives Hawkeye a bunch of back pay for a captain that doesn't exist. So then he donates it to the orphanage again, all the back pay.
Which I thought was really good. Because at first I was just thinking like, oh, is this Hawkeye scamming for money? But when they reveal that he gave all of the fake army pay to the orphanage, it's like, okay, this works out. It's not Hawkeye being like a scummy guy, it's him being a good guy. Which, you know, I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, of course.
When they're purely good dudes.
Yeah, and I really liked that he was trying to he was defrauding the US government, essentially.
But for orphan money, so it's fine.
He was doing it for such a good cause that it was like, okay, this checks out that Hawkeye would do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like, why not try it? First thing I do is throw you out of the army. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, they run this whole circus of like, Tuttle's over here. No, Tuttle's over here. Like, they point people in every which direction, saying like, oh, you just missed him. And occasionally they had Hawkeye or Radar in like doctor scrub, fully masked up, where you cannot see their face. And it was like, oh, there's Captain Tuttle. Didn't see his face though. Mm-hmm. And just this whole game that they play of just how at literally any second this entire thing could collapse and they could get in very big trouble.
Yeah.
I thought was so entertaining and such a good time. When at the very end that General Clayton wants to give Tuttle an army recommendation or like give him a medal or something.
I think the word you're looking for is accolade.
Accolade.
Yeah, you had written accommodation in the thing, and I was like, accommodation? That doesn't make any sense.
Does it not? Okay.
Yeah, so when General Clayton says that Sister Teresa had written him a letter and Henry goes, oh, I didn't know you had a sister, and General Clayton says, no, she's a nun, and Henry goes, oh, you must be very proud. I thought that was just perfect. Like, that was so sitcom-y. I don't know, something about that just worked so well for me. I feel like if I had heard that now, I'd be like, what the hell? But now it's like, I don't know, it just worked. But General Clayton had heard that Tuttle donated 14 months of back pay to the orphanage, so he wanted to give him this medal or like give him something to show appreciation that he was a good American soldier donating to orphans. And so that really left Hawkeye and Trapper in this pickle, essentially, because the general wanted to come to the 407th and give Tuttle the medal himself. And they were like, well, this is not good.
again, this whole thing is like, all right, how are they going to get out of this? And I really didn't, like, I thought they were going to, like, grab a guy and, like, dress him up as Tuttle. Like, there he is. But no, the solution that they come up with, I thought was kind of incredible, just how simple it was. Hawkeye at this, like, ceremony for Tuttle comes up and just hands the general dog tags and be like, he didn't make it. He went out to do field surgery this morning and jumped from the helicopter with everything an army doctor needs except his parachute. What a dumb way for this American hero to go out.
I know. I always wonder when I see these things, I'm like, would that have played well back? Like, how was that received back then? Because not that they were making a mockery of people dying in war, but the idea that someone like, oh yeah, we just like killed this person essentially off in this war time. I wonder how that was like received. Because they weren't making a mockery of it, but they were kind of like, it was played for laughs, and it was kind of tragic.
It is a very tragic way for this non-existent man to go out, and everybody in the camp is like, oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, I know.
Hawkeye gives this like fake eulogy where he's like, all of us were in Tuttle. In fact, you could say we made up Tuttle together. And it's just, and like, Trapper or somebody, maybe it was Radar, I don't know, like, gives him a look like, you're going a little too far, man. We need to stay on course, don't blow it. I don't know how it would be received. This whole show is a commentary on the army, and like, it's kind of cynical towards the US government a lot of the time. So I don't know how a lot of these jokes landed with the audience of the era. That's something we probably should look into.
Yeah, I would really like to know. But because this episode in general, I feel, was kind of like a subtle dig at the army. Like, not overt like it is in a lot of other episodes. But, I mean, Hawkeye made up a whole ass person, you know? And the army was like, okay, sure. Yeah, let's give him medals and pay and stuff like that.
They're lucky that Hawkeye is so well-intentioned.
Yeah, really, exactly. And even the finance guy who comes to the camp to give Tuttle the money says, you wouldn't believe how many people tried to, you know, get one over on Uncle Sam. It's just like, yeah, dude, we know.
Yeah. No, you're right. This episode's kind of like, look how easy it is to... I'm sure in real life it is not as easy to invent a man. But, you know, in fiction they're saying, like, this army is so poorly run that they literally just put a name on a piece of paper and suddenly he's getting 14 months of back pay.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you're right. But, you know, it's a good time and it works out in the end. So let's not worry too much about it.
I really liked also in the end when Hawkeye said that Tuttle died, which is, again, so ridiculous to like even say it, like this fake person died. He said that his GI insurance, which I guess is a thing, what the sole beneficiary for that insurance policy was Sister Teresa's orphanage. So throughout this whole thing, Hawkeye just kind of set up this fund for the orphans, and I thought that was just so sweet and so nice.
This is definitely the sweetest thing I think he's done so far, like the most humanitarian thing.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it's a lie, but literally nobody got hurt from it. Like, he wasn't even pranking anybody or making anybody look silly. So it worked out. I don't know, this one, I just really like this one. This one was super fun. And I know we haven't, like, been super direction-y with how we talk about it, but it's difficult to talk about an episode when all you want to say is, this one's good. I just had a good time watching this one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. It was so MASH to me. Like, remember when we were talking about the episode Cowboy? And Cowboy was the only season 1 episode that was listed as like a classic MASH episode. And I really feel like this would have been more of like a classic MASH episode.
That should have been.
So like shenanigan-y, but it also shows that Hawkeye's a good guy, but will do like these pranks, and they get themselves into these situations and they have to get them out of their situation by doing something just as crazy, if not more crazy. I don't know. I just really like it. It's so good. I understand why it's a fan favorite.
as we talked about a long while ago, this show kind of started with more of its feet on the ground than a lot of sitcoms tend to do, like more of a in the groove. But I feel like this one, they know what they're doing with this show. At least for this particular episode, it was one where they were like firing on all cylinders and kind of like knew what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So I do have a little bit of trivia as we get to winding down. And there's actually so much trivia about this episode, but I'm just going to include a little bit.
Fan favorite.
Yeah. So I thought that the most fun was when in the end credits they credited Captain Tuttle as playing himself. I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, I love that too. I didn't notice that at first, but then I saw that in the IMDb trivia page, which is just so chock full this episode. That I was like, I went back to see if that was true, and it was, and I was like, cool, very fun.
I loved that. It was so funny. And also, Tuttle's serial number was apparently Larry Gelbart's real serial number when he served in the U.S. Army. And also, when Hawkeye and Trapper were making up Tuttle's like backstory, they used Larry Gelbart's real parents' names as Tuttle's parents. I thought that was so cute.
That's my favorite kind of Easter egg that like creators can tuck into a show where it's just like, oh, this is like this is a reference to my life and like I only get it. And I love that he's from Battle Creek, Michigan is what they clarify Tuttle to be. And I think that's such a fun place for him to be because all I know about Battle Creek, Michigan is that it's the cereal capital of the world. So I like that he's from the cereal capital of the world.
I thought that they just made that up. I like the medical school. I was like, I wonder if that's a real place in Michigan. This was fun. If anyone has any other trivia, please contact the show. We always are looking for more fun trivia for episodes. So, just to wrap up, we'd like to give thanks to Jacob Freer-Balco for being our technical consultant, Melissa, my sister, for cover art, and of course, our listeners. Music, social media, and contacts for the show are linked in the description as always. And until next time, make up a whole ass person. Goodbye, farewell, and amen.
Bye, everyone.